Hello, Happy New Year! In this video, I will give my review. I don't know if I'm going to make a second one of this, but a review of a podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, produced by Christianity Today. If you don't know what the podcast is about, maybe go and listen to it, but let me give you a brief explanation what it's about. There was a church in Seattle called Mars Hill, led by the then pastor Mark Driscoll. And he had a spectacular fall. And this podcast tries to understand how Mars Hill started, what happened, what led to the fall of Mars Hill, and it kind of goes a little bit what's happening now as well. Now, before I even start talking a little bit about the things I'm going to talk about, first things first, if 50% of what's said in the podcast is actually true, at least 50% of what's said in the podcast is true about Mark Driscoll, he is 100% disqualified to be a pastor. He shouldn't be a pastor anymore. It shocks me that he's still pastoring a church, a different church. We'll get to why it's a different church in a moment. A different church. And how he gets invited to like events and stuff. Like, you need to understand, and a spoiler alert, I mean, I don't know how much you knew about this. I didn't know almost anything about the story. In fact, first time I heard of Mark Driscoll was one day when he was invited to come to Hillsong conference, when I used to go to Hillsong. There was a protest in front of the church because I think he got invited before Mars Hill fell, and then Mars Hill fell and they didn't disinvite him and he was still in the list. And there was a protest, this whole thing, and then Brian ended up conducting an interview instead that was played in the conference. I'll get to that interview in a moment as well. But I'll get to those things as well in a moment. But there's allegations of spiritual abuse and all that kind of stuff. Right. But what he did to the elders of the church, that is unforgivable. And I'm not saying it's unforgivable. Everything is forgivable. God forgives and restores and whatnot. But that is, wow. He did many, not just him, but some people with him. But he did many terrible things. Terrible things. But he fired members of his, some of the elders. He badmouthed them, lied about them, disqualified them to be elders again. It's an astronomical catastrophe. And as far as I understand, he hasn't even reached out to them and apologized to them. Not to mention the many other things that he did. And I'll probably get to that in a moment. Now, first things first. I don't understand. Why? And also, another thing as well that he did. Lots of things happened, was bad. The church, the elders came together and they were going to come with a plan to restore him back by following some sort of biblical path as described in the Bible. And by some sort, I mean, I think by that point he should probably be disqualified from ministry, but they were going to restore him through a process of church discipline. And the coward that he is, he avoided church discipline by blaspheming the name of God and using the name of God in vain, by saying that God spoke to him that he should leave the church just as he was about to go through church discipline. So he left, restored himself for ministry, and there he is in ministry again. It's like abysmal how people still take him seriously. It is abysmal. Now, I do need to talk about Mike Cosper. Mike Cosper, who is the host of the podcast, who also wrote the podcast and edited the podcast. And I have many problems with him. And I have many problems with the podcast itself. Okay. And I'm going to share some of them. Now, before you defend the poor guy, okay, before you defend the poor guy, it's much easier to go and criticize people. I mean, just look what I'm doing. I'm online criticizing people. He used to be a pastor. I don't know he's not a pastor anymore and decided to be a journalist. You know the law, you know the relationship. I don't know if you know, but if you know me well, you know what I feel about journalists, or at least most of them, who are absolutely awful and liars and biased and paint themselves as being, oh, I'm the arbiter of truth. I don't know why. It's much easier. It's much easier to do what he's doing and be a journalist and criticizing things and try to find stuff than to be a pastor. So I understand. I mean, I don't know what led to him not being a pastor anymore, but besides the point. Don't feel bad for the guy. He's there. He put a thing up with his name attached to it. When you put stuff up online, like, you'll be criticized. Okay, so stop it. If you love the guy, whatever. Who cares? Here's my problem. I mean, I have many problems, but the biggest of them all is that I don't know what he stands for. I have no idea what his positions are. And you might be thinking, well, of course not, because it's unbiased. It's supposed to be an objective look at Mars Hill, the Horizon 4 Mars Hill. There's no such thing. Listen, there's no such thing as an objective look. He wrote and he edited the podcast. He also conducted the interviews and chose how to chop them up. Even if he tried to be as unbiased as possible, he's still biased. And I think it would be important for the audience to understand what he believes in, especially when it comes to egalitarianism or complementarianism. Is he an egalitarian? Is he complementarian? I have no idea. I think he's an egalitarian because he feels like the podcast has a strong bias against complementarianism. But it's hard to know because he never said anything about himself. Sometimes he even goes and says, oh, but my experience, and that's it. And he doesn't talk, like, he sometimes introduces himself in the podcast, but doesn't really talk about it. It's very weird. Like, it's very, very weird. I have many, many problems with the way he led this. But the biggest problem is that he doesn't explain his positions. And just, again, I'll say it again, just because maybe you didn't get it, okay? Stop with this. Oh, but he is supposed to be objective and unbiased. It's not unbiased. Of course it's biased. Any documentary, any documentary, not just a podcast, which is a documentary podcast because it's going through the story, right? But a documentary, a movie, there is a bias. The director, the writer, there is a bias. There's a something they want to look, and they bring one perspective, and they have a purpose, and they are trying to do something. And from my understanding, the purpose of the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill is to understand why it happened, so it wouldn't happen again. It wouldn't happen to other churches, and maybe to help with healing and stuff. But I just want, it would be very helpful to understand the bias of Mike Cosper. I don't know him. I have no idea who the guy is until this podcast. I only found out that he was, I have another one, this is good, that he was, who he was, because then I went on Instagram and searched for Mike Cosper. Another thing that I thought it was fascinating, was like, oh, wow, like, mind-blowing, is there's an episode where he talks about totalitarianism and how it happens, and people don't realize that they are being part of this, and they do it for good and stuff, but they don't realize it. It's so ironic. It's so ironic that the guy who is saying these words posts a photo of his vaccination card on his Instagram, bragging about it, and then posts a photo of his daughters bragging about them getting vaccinated. It's like, whoosh, just went over his head what's happening in the world right now. While he's talking about totalitarianism and how people just get caught on it without noticing. It's like it missed him. I don't understand. So it's quite fascinating to me. It's annoying. It annoys me. It annoys me. First, because journalists usually annoy me. But second, because he's biased, and I don't know he's biased. He just talks about, like, so to me, it's hard because I want to understand, because he's doing the analysis as well, all right? So he's doing the analysis of what's happening. Oh, is this what happened? Is this what happened? And sometimes it looks like he goes down on complementarianism. He blames a lot of what happened in Mark Driscoll being a complementarian, but not explicitly sometimes. Sometimes it's just like implied in some very cleverly ways of doing it without explicitly saying it. If I knew his bias, at least I could filter his bias. I don't know what he's on about. I don't understand. Also, he gets it wrong. It has nothing. What happened in Mars Hill has almost absolutely nothing to do with Mark Driscoll being a complementarian. Absolutely nothing. He also misses one of the biggest points of the failure of Mars Hill that I'll get to in a moment. Another thing that he does that annoys me is that he uses words such as homophobic, transphobic. Okay, misogynistic is a word that actually makes sense, but he validates words that are used as insults to shut down stuff. It's like, I don't care for that kind of stuff. And he does it when he's talking about Mark Driscoll. There was a forum in the church. It's just fascinating. The whole thing is just like, what? What is this weird church? And Mark Driscoll one day created a username, a fake username, and he posted all these awful, awful posts, like talking down to women and to gays and whatnot. Because the whole thing of the church, it was like, be a man, be a man. Like this hyper masculinity, and some things make sense. Strong men protect women. Strong men, when there's weak men in society, exhibit A, look around. Weak men in society, chaos ensues. When there's strong men, the thing is, strong men doesn't necessarily mean physically strong. Sometimes strong man means standing up for the truth, like I'm doing right now, or like I do in my videos. And again, I know it's weird me calling myself a strong man, but literally standing up for truth is one of the characteristics of a strong man. Okay. But anyway, he had this forum and he would go and say like bizarre stuff, insulting people and stuff under the pseudonym. And eventually they found out it's him. Their blogs, if you want to look, it's just ridiculous. But then the Mike Cosper is like, oh, and his posts were misogynistic. Yes, homophobic and transphobic and da-da-da. I was just like, dude, these words you're using, they make no sense, except for the misogynistic, okay? It's like, maybe say insulting to gay people. But anyway, another thing that annoys me is when people validate terms like that, and they use the terms in a non-ironic way, terms that make no sense. But let's go to the biggest, like the thing that really... So they try to understand what happened, okay? And there's some episodes that almost get there, almost get to the reasoning behind it. And it's like, Mark Driscoll was a celebrity pastor. And there are many celebrity pastors out there. Many of them who are just like Mark Driscoll. Different theology, but the big problem is right there. And people follow them. The same people who think, oh, Mark Driscoll, awful, are there following these other pastors. But Mike Cosper somehow doesn't pick up on that. But he goes over the whole celebrity pastor culture, like they're surrounded by people who all agree with them. And yes, this is so true. It's like this in churches with celebrity pastors. Now, being a Hillsong, I know how some things are. Everyone wants to be around. Oh, this and that. Oh, Pastor Brian. Oh, it's like almost a holy man. You don't touch him. Literally, like, to the point that sometimes there was a message. Oh my gosh, I remember. Someone was saying, oh yeah, when he was in the room, there was almost a presence. Oh, come on. Just shut up. Anyway. So it's surrounded with people who it's yes people, yes people who say yes to stuff. And he creates this celebrity culture thing, and that's the reason. And no one really said no to him, and the people who did were thrown under the bus or behind the bus. And there's a talk of him when he talks about this whole bus thing, which is, again, it's like abysmal how right in the open he was. And they tried to pin down his theology, and because he was reformed, but he was not really, because now he denies Reformed theology. Like Mark Driscoll, from listening to this podcast and understanding, like trying to understand what's going on, he's literally using stuff because he is a very self-centered man who just wanted fame. And I don't know. I mean, this is just me making my own points here. But it looks like yeah, very self-centered, just using stuff for his benefit, which is awful. But here's the problem that Mike Cosper didn't mention. Here's the problem. Here is the big problem. How did people, so many people, devoted their lives to this church, devoted their lives to Mark Driscoll? And there's stories of people who like literally devoted their lives, and they had great stories about Mark Driscoll as well, like where Mark and his wife, whatever her name is, Grace or something, don't remember, were very good to them, let them stay in their house, helped, went to the hospital when they were sick, like this amazing, like very loving stories. How did they follow this? How did they stay with the church for so long? Even when he was doing things that were bad, and they were clearly bad, and they realized this is not good. I don't understand. Here it is. Because in the podcast, he never gets to this point. It's always like, oh, they were part of this church gave everything to them, da 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 da. But here's the crux of the matter. Here's the crux of the matter. There's a theology of the church who sees the church as reach and influence the world. And that's the mission statement of Hillsong Church. To reach and influence the world by building a large, Bible-based, Christ-centered church, transforming mindsets and influencing into every sphere of life, or something like that. It's this grandiose mission statement. Okay, this grandiose mission statement. We're here to influence the world. Mark Driscoll, the three things that, or something like that. Okay, I don't fully remember. Again, I didn't take notes. This is just the top of my head. I've been rehearsing this video for some time. He will tell people, get married, have a family, have children, and buy land. Why was he doing that? Because the vision was take over Seattle, take over the city, reach and influence the culture, reach and influence the city. Do this. Look, we're transforming the city. Look how many people came to our church this weekend. We're reaching this many people. And he will have like a online ministry. It was one of the first churches, one of the first preachers to have an online ministry. The stories are fascinating with his media guy who talks a lot about this. And I might get to that in a moment. But he was reaching a lot of people. When people believe that they are part of something that is bigger than themselves. Oh, some churches love to use this. Oh, we're part of something bigger than ourselves. When people believe that they're bigger than themselves, they're doing this great good for humanity. Which, by the way, it's also how tyrannies happen. Okay? Hitler thought that he was doing a great good to Germany. And so were the people who were with him, obeying him and doing the things that he asked them to do, or commanded them to do. They thought they were doing something great for Germany. Same thing here, all right? It's kind of transferable. I know I'm not comparing Mars Hill to Nazi Germany. Just one principle there, okay? Just calm down, everybody. But when you believe you're doing something amazing, something that is transforming your city, look how many people you're influencing. We're influencing so many pastors today. They're influencers. Look at their reach. Look how many people watch their videos on Instagram. They are reaching the lost. When you're part of something like that, it's very easy to overlook stuff, because at the end of the day you think, well, yeah, this is not perfect, but look, this is a once-in-a-lifetime movement. This is a once-in-a-lifetime leaders that I'm following. Again, all lies. And many churches use the same language, okay? Including Hillsong. I've heard all these terms. I've heard at Hillsong before. And I'm not saying that Hillsong is in the same way as Mark Driscoll. I will say, though, the Elevation Church with Stephen Furtick, it's the same. His theology is different. He might not be as violent and abuse people like Mike Driscoll does. But that man is a ticking time bomb. Stephen Furtick, he is a self-centered, just like Mark Driscoll. Like it's like an embodiment of that spirit of, look how great we're doing, we're transforming, we're influencing the world. Stay away from that man. okay? But anyway, so when you're part of something that is just so great, look at the vision we have. All these pastors who are not really pastors, but they are vision casters. They're casting vision instead of actually doing what the Bible teaches them to do, which I'll get to in a moment, what a church should look like. They're casting vision. Look how many people we're reaching. We're casting vision. You go to Hillsong and there's like all this, the church that I see, the church that was like Brian Houston wrote years ago, and now there's a new one. The church that I now see, it's all about this grandiose vision. Television screens and thousands of people reached, and millions, and children, and families, and this, which is, again, let me just clarify. Many of these things are good. The bad thing is this thought that as a church, we're called to influence the world. And we're called to, there's this spheres of influence. That is not the church's primary calling. There's not one place in the Bible. I dare you, if you disagree with me, please write a comment and tell me, where in the Bible does it say there's a command from Jesus or from Paul or from one of the apostles that says, go and influence the world? It says, reach the world, but reach the world with a very specific message. Jesus in Matthew 28 said, go and disciple, make disciples. Nowhere in the Bible it says, buy land, have a family. Well, have a family is a biblical idea. But Jesus never said get married and make disciples. No. He said go and make disciples. That is the fruit of the church. It's not the numbers. It's not how many people you reach on Instagram. It's not how many people watch your sermons on YouTube. It's not how many comments and likes you have. It is, are you making disciples? Are you making disciples? A pastor in a tiny town in the outback of Australia who has a membership of maybe 30 people, if he's discipling these 30 people, he is obeying Jesus more than the celebrity pastors that all they care about is their appearance, and if the message was fire, and if people clapped. Stephen Furtick is like, it's insane how self-centered that man is, and how the blasphemy that comes out of his mouth, and people clap and love him, and it's like, oh no, it's fine. And I used to be someone who would overlook. My friend Louise, whom I love, will come to me and say, no, Stephen Furtick. I'll be like, no, but look at the people, look how many people it's reaching. Exactly. You see what I'm saying? We're doing something bigger than ourselves. Jesus never said, do something bigger than yourself. He said, make disciples. And Paul later says, we were reconciled with God. And God has given us the ministry of influence. No, that's not what he said. He said he has given us the ministry of reconciliation, to reconcile people with God and also with one another, but primarily reconcile people with God. That is what we are called to do, to reconcile people with God and to make disciples. And when a church misses the point and starts focusing on something else, starts focusing on influencing and being big and grandiose ideas, you lose the focus. Okay? You lose the focus. The focus is to make disciples, to reach people, reconcile them with God through the preaching of the gospel, the full gospel. The gospel being, you're a sinner. There's nothing you can do. Nothing you can do that can atone for your sins. Nothing you can do that will satisfy God's perfect standards. Absolutely nothing. You're doomed to hell. You can work as hard as you can. You're still doomed to hell. You're a sinner, and you're going to continue to be a sinner. But Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came and died on the cross for your sins and was punished in your place. And God's wrath was satisfied in his death. And he rose again from the dead to prove that he was really the Son of God and that God's purposes were done. It's finished. And if you put your trust in Jesus, leave everything behind. It will cost you everything. You cost your life. Leave everything behind. Put your trust in Jesus and follow him. And let yourself be discipled by him. And make disciples. And now devote your life to the gospel. That's the gospel. Okay? That's our job as a church, to preach that message. Not to attract people with beautiful music and bands and stuff. Not to have many followers on Instagram. Because if you preach the message I just told you, you're not going to have followers on Instagram. You're not going to have many followers. You're not going to, because people find that offensive. Oh, but maybe if we tone down the message a little bit, because look how many people we're influencing. Another thing that they like to say is we're building the church. You're not building the church. Nowhere in the Bible it says that we are building the church. There's one person who builds the church. It is Jesus. Jesus is building his church and we are serving him. And we are participating in that. But it's just when people say, we're building the church. And then it's like you stretch people to their limits, which happen a lot in Mars Hill as well, if you go through the podcast. But not just in Mars Hill, it happens in other places as well. Happens in many churches. They have a fast pace. But look how many people we're reaching. And then people are like, oh, but do we have to do this? Do we have to do this? And then they change the language. Because when you change the language, change the culture, you get people focused on the thing. Can you believe that we get to do this? And now everyone is excited because they're building the church. They're doing something greater than themselves. But in reality, they are missing the point. The point is not on this earth. We're reconciling people with God because our reward is in heaven. And that is the biggest problem with Mars Hill. It's the reason why it fell. It's the reason why so many people were misled by Mark Driscoll. Because they were all believing they were doing something great and building the church. Building the church, when what they were doing was building this grandiose dream of a man who used the church a lot for himself, including using a service that bought books in New York City. So his books using church money, by the way, using church money, but paid for this company who sends people around to buy books in New York City so that his book would be on the New York Times bestsellers list. How narcissistic do you have to be to do something like that? It's astounding. It's astounding what Mark Driscoll did. It's astounding to me that he's still a pastor in another church and that thousands of people follow him. It's like, it's just so much. Like I could go through all the I'm not going to. If you're interested, go and watch the podcast. And it's because of that bad eschatology that thinks, oh, we're going to transform the earth and Jesus is going to come back. No. I think, and a lot of people agree, I mean, this eschatology is this thing that is a bit different. You have to hold your eschatology very, very loosely in your hand because some things are a bit hard to understand or hard to be 100% sure about, especially when you're trying to interpret Revelation. But to me, it's very clear. One thing is very clear. The earth is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And one day Jesus is going to come back. To think that, oh, look how big my church is. This is the favor of the Lord. Maybe. Or maybe it's just because people are attracted to what you're doing. You have beautiful music. People love music. Who wouldn't like to come to music? Who wouldn't like to come to a place and hear people preach about themselves? Oh, you're great. You're wonderful. Just follow your dreams. I mean, how many people go to Joel Osteen's church? So many. It's because it's all about themselves. People love to do that. People love to hear that. Stop defending Joel Osteen. Stop defending Stephen Furtick. They are not the victims here. Do you understand? They can defend themselves. They're very powerful and they can defend themselves. They have all the power and all the people around them that will just say yes to them as much as they want because they're very powerful. So don't worry about them. They can defend themselves. But who doesn't like going to a church that just affirms you're beautiful, you're powerful, you're doing something great, your dreams are brilliant. Oh, wow. When Jesus comes and says, if you want to follow me, take up your cross and follow me. You want to be my disciple, you need to eat my body and drink my blood. Like, what? What are you talking about, Jesus? Deny yourself. Be a servant. No one wants to hear that. Because that's the gospel. and that it costs you everything. There's a message by Stephen Lawson. I'm going to link in the description. What a great sermon by Stephen Lawson. The cost of discipleship or something like that. Something along the lines. It's so good. That sermon is so good. Please listen to it. But no one wants that. Very few people want that. Okay. Why are these churches so full? Because of the favor of God? No. It's because they are preaching what people want to hear. Who doesn't want to hear that? Who doesn't want to go to church and be entertained and then be told that, oh, you're lovely, you're wonderful, God has plans for you. Or for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. Jeremiah was speaking to Israel. Israel was in exile. And God was speaking of a new covenant that is in Jesus, fulfilled in Jesus. That's what that text is about. It's not about your dream about, oh, one day I want to be a doctor. No, it's not about that. It's about one day you're going to be in heaven worshiping God as a eschatological fulfillment in heaven. All right? So, but people love to hear that stuff about themselves. I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. It's not talking, you know what Paul's talking about? He's talking about I can have a lot and I can be in poverty and not have food to eat. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Try saying that next time you're in pain and in a lot of trouble. And say, yes, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Because that's the context of that verse. Nobody wants to hear that stuff. They just want to hear you're part of something great. You're building God's church. You are wonderful. You are just wonderful. That's why these churches are full. And then you go and use and say, oh, look at the fruit of our work. Look how many people we reached. But did you reach them with the gospel? Or did you reach them with the message they want to hear? Paul Washer, one day he was, I think it's a bit extreme, but it's also true, okay? I mean, Paul Washer is always a bit extreme. But one day he was talking about, oh, you know, don't feel sorry for the people who are misled by these wolves in sheep's clothing. You know, but these pastors, these fake pastors and fake prophets, false prophets who go and preach this message of prosperity and stuff. They are there because they want to. That's the message they want. And there's a lot of truth in that. People are misled, and sometimes they're misled, truthfully misled, but sometimes they're there because that's the message they want. You want a bigger car, you want your business to do great. I mean, who doesn't want that kind of stuff? But yeah, God will give that to you. He's your servant. Here, just pray this prayer, sow your seed. Just sow your seed into the ministry, and God is going to multiply 10-fold, 50-fold, 100-fold, 30-fold. No. Now, that's one type of theology that Mark Driscoll didn't do as much. But the problem, and again I'm going to repeat it, the problem is this grandiose vision. We're going to influence the world. And when you have that, you're doing something great for the world. Look, we're transforming the city, we're buying land, we're having children, we're having beautiful families, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. But when you think that that's what God called you to do, when God specifically called us to be aliens on this land, because our reward is in heaven, we're here to preach the gospel, to reconcile people with God, to make disciples. And he didn't finish that, by the way. Go and make disciples. Teaching them to do what? To obey everything I have commanded you. Wow. Who wants to do that? Right. That's what the church is for. And when you have that grandiose idea, we're casting vision. Yeah. If you're casting vision, you're not a pastor. If you're a pastor when you're pastoring people, when you're actually preaching the word of God accurately, with all the aspects, all of them, without hiding the parts that people don't want to hear. You know, you go preach systematically through the word of God. That's what a pastor is supposed to do, to lead his sheep in the right way and to protect them from bad teaching and bad doctrine and heresies. Stay away from churches like that. Stay away if the main goal of the church is we're here to give you purpose. It's all these words, man. All these words. Our purpose is very clear. It's found in the Bible. To make disciples and to reconcile people with Jesus. That is your purpose. As a Christian, you're a Christian. That is your purpose. That's the dream that God made. He planned for you beforehand, before He saved you. Those are the good works that God prepared for you beforehand. If you're gonna, I don't know, whatever you're gonna do, go be a doctor, do this and do that. Great stuff. That is not your main purpose in life, in this life. That is not. So stay away from churches who are like that, because they are just like Mark Driscoll. The pastors are just, and some of them, in some degree, maybe not so much. And people like Stephen Furtick and other people, other pastors like that, Joel Osteen, they will look at Mark Driscoll and they're going to learn from his mistakes, because if Mark Driscoll was only a little bit more careful, if he controlled his mouth just a little bit more, yeah, he would still be a pastor at Mars Hill Church. And he would still be doing the same evil things that he was doing before. And by, maybe not evil, but definitely wicked. And no one would have noticed. The only reason people noticed is because he was abusive, he disrespected people, he said all these inappropriate things in the forum. No one really cares about the fact that he was lying and preaching a bad gospel and giving people bad purpose. And again, those things by itself, they are not bad. Having a good career, not bad. No. Having a nice car, depends, probably not bad, unless you're going to go in debt buying a car, like I did. Well, it's not that bad. Okay, but wouldn't do that again. Wouldn't get a loan to buy a car again. All these things, they are nice. Some of these things are nice, but they are not. They are not the gospel. They are not God's purpose for your life. They are not. And no church should be built on a grandiose, we're influencing the world. Whoa. We're discipling people. Yeah? We're discipling people. Let me just get to the... I should actually know this off by heart. Look at this. I can't believe I do not know this. But what is the mission statement of my current church that I love so much? Let me find it. Where is it? Oh my gosh, where am I gonna find this? Okay, this is what it is. Although this is worded a little bit different, but it says yes. MBM loves seeing lives transformed through Jesus to the glory of God. That is what a church does. Okay, we disciple people, they're transformed through Jesus. Why? To glorify God. That's it. Glorify God. No one else. Not the church. Not the pastor. No. God. And the fact that the podcast missed this crucial thing, it just shows, like, I don't know Mike Cosper. I don't know what he believes. Maybe he agrees with me, but how would I know? He didn't talk about it. I don't know. I might make another video about this. It's quite long. I can see the recording here. But look, let me know what you think. If you watched the podcast, let me know. If you didn't, I don't know. Let me know if you want me, anything specific you want me to talk about. And please subscribe, like the video, write comments and stuff. Support the channel. I'll keep making videos. And yeah, thank you for watching until this point. I appreciate you.